The human fleet materialized around Vorthak Prime like ghosts becoming solid. 13 ships appeared simultaneously in orbit around the Empire's capital world, their hulls gleaming in the light of the ancient star. The planet's massive defense networks remained silent, their operators too stunned to react. Captain Li Jiwan stood on the bridge of the Indomitable, watching the sprawling cities of the Imperial homeworld spread out below. 3 billion aliens lived on the surface, the descendants of conquerors who had ruled the galaxy for 3,000 years. Today, they would learn that their empire's time was ending. "Sir, the Imperial High Command is requesting permission to board," Communications Officer Nam Hyejin reported. "Emperor Vorthak himself wishes to meet with you." "Grant permission," Li said calmly. "But they come aboard our ship under our terms." The Imperial shuttle that approached the Indomitable was a masterpiece of alien engineering, its hull adorned with precious metals and quantum crystals that showed the wealth of a galactic empire. But the beings who emerged from it moved with the careful steps of those who had been thoroughly defeated. Emperor Vorthak led the delegation, his ancient form still impressive despite his obvious uncertainty. Behind him came Admiral Kethvar, General Krathvan, and Chief Science Officer Velnara. The most powerful beings in the galaxy were about to enter a human warship as supplicants. The airlock cycled, and the Imperial delegation stepped aboard the Indomitable. They stopped immediately, their eyes wide with shock at what they saw. The ship's interior defied every law of physics they understood. Corridors stretched away in directions that shouldn't exist within the vessel's external dimensions. Rooms opened onto spaces larger than the ship itself. Gravity flowed in patterns that made no sense, allowing crew members to walk on walls and ceilings as easily as floors. "Welcome aboard the Indomitable," Li said, greeting them in the main conference room. "I'm Fleet Admiral Li Jiwan of the United Earth Defense Force." The room they entered was impossible. It was clearly larger than the entire ship, with a ceiling that seemed to extend into infinity. Stars were visible through transparent walls, but they weren't the same stars visible from outside the vessel. Emperor Vorthak stared around the chamber in amazement. "How is this possible?" "Dimensional engineering," Dr. Lim Wanho explained from his position at the conference table. "We've learned to fold space in ways that allow our ships to be larger inside than outside. It's a practical application of non-Euclidean geometry." Admiral Kethvar's voice was barely a whisper. "The energy requirements for this technology should collapse space-time itself. Only if you try to force the process," Li replied. "We've learned to work with the natural flexibility of reality, instead of fighting against it. Please sit down. We have much to discuss." The Imperial delegation took their seats around the conference table, their movements uncertain as they tried to adjust to gravity that seemed to shift based on their intentions rather than physical laws. "You asked for terms," Li began. "Before we discuss them, I want you to understand something. We didn't come here to conquer your empire. We came here to revolutionize it." Emperor Vorthak's eyes narrowed. "Explain." Deputy Admiral Kang Sujin activated a holographic display that showed the galaxy's current state. "Your empire has ruled for 3,000 years using the same technologies and the same methods. You've crushed every species that showed innovation, because you were afraid they might threaten your dominance. The result is a stagnant civilization that stopped advancing centuries ago." The display showed comparison charts that made the Imperial delegation lean forward in amazement. "These are innovation rates across your empire over the past millennium," Kang continued. "Scientific advancement has decreased by 97%. Technological development has essentially stopped. Cultural evolution has been replaced by rigid conformity. Your empire is dying," Dr. Lim added gently. "Not from external threats, but from internal stagnation. You've created a civilization that values stability over growth, conformity over creativity." Velnara studied the data with growing understanding. "You're suggesting that our dominance has made us weak." "Not weak," Li corrected. "Limited. You've spent 3 millennia perfecting the same technologies instead of exploring new possibilities. You see the universe as a set of rules to be obeyed. We see it as a puzzle to be solved." Li stood and walked to the chamber's impossible window, looking out at stars that existed in dimensions the Empire had never discovered. 3 years ago, you destroyed our diplomatic mission because you assumed we were too primitive to matter. That single act motivated humanity to revolutionize our understanding of reality itself." He turned back to face the Imperial delegation. In 3 years, we've learned more about the fundamental nature of existence than your empire has discovered in 3 millennia. Do you know why? The silence stretched until Emperor Vorthak finally spoke. Tell me. Because we never assume we know everything, Lee said simply. Every human on this ship represents a species that refuses to accept limitations. When you told us to submit or be destroyed, we chose a third option. We changed the rules of the game. Dr. Lim activated another device, a small crystalline structure that pulsed with soft light. This is a quantum consciousness enhancer. It temporarily allows other species to perceive reality as humans do. Would you like to experience the universe through human consciousness? The Imperial delegation exchanged uncertain glances. Admiral Kethvar spoke first. What will happen to us? Nothing permanent, Dr. Lim assured them. You'll simply see the universe as it really is instead of as you've been taught to see it. The effects will fade within an hour. Emperor Vorthak straightened his ancient spine. Do it. The crystal pulsed brighter and waves of energy washed over the Imperial delegation. Their eyes widened as their consciousness expanded beyond the limitations they had accepted their entire lives. For the first time, they saw the universe as humans saw it. Reality wasn't a rigid system of unchangeable laws. It was an infinite canvas of possibility, waiting for minds brave enough to reshape it. The physical laws they had considered absolute were merely starting points for exploration. Space and time weren't barriers but tools to be manipulated by those who understood their true nature. Impossible, Velnara whispered, but her voice carried wonder instead of denial. The mathematics are so elegant. Why didn't we see this before? Because you stopped looking, Lee replied. Your empire achieved dominance and decided you had learned everything worth knowing. You created a civilization based on the assumption that progress had ended. The enhanced consciousness lasted for nearly an hour, during which the Imperial delegation experienced concepts that transformed their understanding of existence itself. When the effects faded, they found themselves forever changed by glimpses of infinite possibility. Emperor Vorthak spoke slowly, his voice carrying the weight of 3,000 years of certainty crumbling away. What do you want from us? Partnership, Lee said simply. Not submission, not conquest. We want to help your empire remember how to grow again. He gestured to the holographic display, which now showed potential futures instead of historical stagnation. Imagine an empire where every species contributes their unique perspective to solving the universe's mysteries, where innovation is rewarded instead of suppressed, where the goal isn't maintaining control but exploring infinite possibilities. Admiral Kethvar leaned forward. You're talking about revolution. We're talking about evolution, Deputy Admiral Kang corrected. The Empire doesn't need to be destroyed. It needs to be transformed. The negotiations that followed changed the course of galactic history. The Terran Accords established humanity not as conquerors but as teachers and partners in a new galactic paradigm. The Empire's rigid hierarchy gave way to a collaborative confederation where innovation and creativity were valued above military might. Months later, Admiral Choi Hyuk stood on the bridge of the first joint human-alien exploration vessel, the UES Horizon. Beside him, former Imperial Admiral Kethvar served as his deputy, learning to see the universe through human eyes. Where to today, Admiral? Choi asked. Kethvar studied the star charts with eyes that had learned to see possibility instead of limitation. The Andromeda Galaxy. Our long-range sensors have detected quantum signatures that suggest civilizations with technologies we've never imagined. Excellent, Choi smiled. Let's go see what's possible. The ship phased out of normal space-time, carrying the combined crews toward new discoveries that would reshape their understanding of existence itself. Behind them, the galaxy buzzed with activity as thousands of species began learning to think like humans, not as subjects bound by unchangeable laws, but as explorers free to rewrite reality itself. In schools across the galaxy, children of dozens of species learned together, studying physics not as immutable truth but as the first step toward reshaping the universe. The age of stagnation had ended. The age of infinite possibility had begun. Admiral Kethvar stood in the emergency session of the Imperial War Council, his scales dulled with exhaustion and growing despair. Around the holographic table, the Empire's greatest military minds struggled with a problem they had never faced before. An enemy they couldn't fight. Status report, Emperor Vorthak commanded, his ancient voice carrying the weight of 3 millennia of absolute power. "Your Majesty, we have lost contact with 47 major installations," General Krathvon reported. "The human ships continue to disable our infrastructure without actually destroying it. Our quantum communication networks are completely offline. Supply lines have been severed across 8 sectors. How many ships have we destroyed?" The silence that followed was more damning than any report. Kethavar finally spoke. "None, Your Majesty. We have not successfully destroyed a single human vessel." The Emperor's rage was a living thing, filling the chamber with murderous intent. "We have deployed over 3,000 ships against 13 human vessels. Our technology has dominated the galaxy for 3,000 years. How is this possible?" Chief Science Officer Velnara stepped forward, her normally proud bearing subdued. "Your Majesty, I have analyzed the human technology extensively. They are not using advanced versions of our systems. They are using completely different principles that we never discovered." "Explain." Velnara activated a holographic display showing complex equations and dimensional models. "The humans have learned to manipulate the fundamental forces that govern reality. They don't just use technology, Your Majesty. They rewrite the laws of physics in localized areas around their ships." "That's impossible," Kethavar protested. "The laws of physics are absolute." "That's what we believed," Velnara replied quietly. "The humans have proven us wrong. They can exist in multiple dimensional states simultaneously, making our weapons pass through them harmlessly. They can manipulate quantum mechanics to disable our equipment from a distance. They can accelerate matter to relativistic speeds using controlled gravitational fields." Emperor Vorthak's eyes burned with desperate fury. "Then we will use the forbidden weapons. Deploy the planet killers. Use the reality bombs. Activate the temporal disruptors." A chill ran through the chamber. The forbidden weapons were technology so dangerous that the Empire had banned their use after they nearly destroyed entire star systems during testing. Planet killers could tear holes in space-time itself. Reality bombs could erase matter from existence. Temporal disruptors could attack targets in the past. "Your Majesty," Kethavar said carefully, "those weapons are uncontrollable. They could damage our own territory." "I don't care," the Emperor snarled. "Deploy them all. I want these humans erased from existence across all timelines." The orders went out across Imperial space. Deep in hidden weapons vaults, devices that had been sealed for centuries were awakened. The Empire's most dangerous scientists began preparing weapons that could destroy reality itself. The first attack came without warning. A planet-killer weapon fired at the human destroyer Retribution, tearing a hole in space-time that should have consumed the entire ship. The weapon worked by creating a localized collapse of dimensional barriers, allowing the raw chaos of interdimensional space to destroy anything nearby. Captain Yoon Jae-hyun watched calmly as the reality-tearing blast approached his ship. "Phase shift to quantum uncertainty state," he ordered. The Retribution simply stepped sideways out of normal reality. The planet-killer weapon struck empty space where the ship had been, creating a spectacular explosion that lit up the entire star system. When the energy dissipated, the human ship phased back into normal space, completely undamaged. "Report," Yoon commanded. The weapon created a dimensional rift approximately 12 kilometers in diameter, his science officer reported. "Very impressive destructive force, but it can only affect targets that exist in normal spacetime." The second attack targeted the reconnaissance ship Shadow with a reality bomb, a weapon designed to erase matter from existence at the quantum level. The bomb worked by convincing the universe that the target had never existed in the first place. Captain Huang Sunwoo received the weapon with scientific curiosity. "Quantum existence denial technology," he mused. "Crude but effective against conventional targets. Too bad we're not conventional." The Shadow existed in a state of quantum uncertainty that made it impossible for the reality bomb to target. The weapon exploded harmlessly, erasing several million cubic kilometers of empty space while the human ship watched from a parallel dimensional state. The third attack was the most desperate of all. Imperial scientists used temporal disruptors to attack human ships in the past, trying to prevent them from ever reaching Imperial space. The weapons reached back through time to the moment the human fleet had left Earth. Dr. Lim Wanho aboard the Indomitable detected the temporal assault immediately. "Captain, the Empire is attempting to attack us through time itself. Can they succeed?" Lee asked. "Not against our temporal shields," Dr. Lim replied with a slight smile. "We've learned to exist in multiple timeline states simultaneously. They're trying to change a past that exists in a different dimensional framework from the one they can access. The temporal weapons struck with incredible force, rewriting history across multiple timelines. In some realities, the human fleet never left Earth. In others, humanity never developed faster than light travel. In still others, Earth itself was destroyed before humans could reach the stars. But in the timeline that mattered, the one where the Empire faced the consequences of their actions, the human ships remained exactly where they were. The attacks had failed completely. On Vorthak Prime, the Emperor received reports of total failure with growing madness. "How is this possible?" he screamed. "We used weapons that can destroy space and time itself." Velnara's analysis was devastating. "Your Majesty, the humans exist outside our understanding of reality. They've learned to manipulate the fundamental framework that governs existence. Our most powerful weapons are useless because they operate within the same physical laws the humans have learned to rewrite. Then what can we do?" For the first time in Imperial history, the Empire's greatest scientists had no answer. Captain Lee received a transmission from Fleet Admiral Bay aboard the Defiance. "Captain, Imperial forces are pulling back across all sectors. They're withdrawing to defensive positions around their capital worlds." "Casualties?" Lee asked. "None on our side. The Empire has lost approximately 40 ships that engaged us directly, but we've avoided targeting vessels that maintained a safe distance. Total Imperial military deaths are under 3,000. Lee nodded. The human strategy had been to demonstrate overwhelming technological superiority while minimizing actual destruction. They wanted the Empire to surrender, not to fight to the last ship. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission from Vorthak Prime," Communications Officer Nam Hijin reported. "It's from Emperor Vorthak himself." The main screen showed the ancient ruler of the galaxy, his reptilian features aged by millennia of absolute power. For the first time in his long life, the Emperor looked uncertain. "Human Captain," Vorthak said slowly, "I offer a meeting to discuss terms." Lee studied the alien ruler who had dismissed humanity as primitives worthy only of conquest or destruction. "What terms did you have in mind, Your Majesty?" "Surrender of your fleet in exchange for the safety of your homeworld." Lee's laugh was soft but carried across the communication channel like a threat. "Your Majesty, I think you misunderstand the situation. We're not here to negotiate our surrender. We're here to offer you the chance to surrender to us." The Emperor's eyes widened in shock. In 3,000 years of rule, no one had ever demanded his surrender. "You have 24 hours to consider our offer," Lee continued. "After that, we will demonstrate what happens when humans stop holding back." The Imperial High Command Chamber on Vorthak Prime had not seen such chaos in 1,000 years. Emergency holographic displays showed the impossible situation unfolding across the Empire. 13 human ships had somehow penetrated the most secure space in the galaxy and were systematically dismantling Imperial infrastructure. Emperor Vorthak himself stood at the center of the chamber, his ancient form radiating fury and disbelief. Around him, the Empire's greatest military minds struggled to comprehend what they were seeing. "Report," the Emperor commanded. General Krathvon stepped forward, his scales pale with shock. "Your Majesty, the human vessels have disabled communication networks in 17 sectors. They're not destroying our installations, but they're making them completely useless. Our quantum entanglement networks have gone silent across half the Empire. How many ships are we facing?" 13 confirmed vessels, Your Majesty." "But their capabilities?" Krathvon hesitated. "Your Majesty, they're using technology that should not exist. They can phase in and out of normal space, making our weapons useless. Their kinetic weapons can destroy our largest ships with single shots." Emperor Vorthak's eyes burned with ancient rage. "Mobilize the Void Hunters. Deploy the Titan fleet. I want these primitives crushed." The command went out across Imperial space. The Void Hunters were the Empire's elite warriors, cybernetically enhanced soldiers who piloted reality-warping starfighters. The Titan fleet consisted of dreadnoughts the size of small moons, each one capable of destroying entire star systems. But the humans had already anticipated this response. Aboard the stealth carrier Defiance, Fleet Admiral Bay Minho coordinated the broader human assault. His ship hung invisible in the void between star systems, its advanced cloaking technology making it undetectable to Imperial sensors. "Admiral, we're receiving reports from all strike teams," Communications Officer Lieutenant Yoon Misul reported. Captain Yoon Jae-hyun's destroyer group has successfully disabled the communication hub at Nexus 7. Captain Hwang Sunwoo's reconnaissance ship has mapped the Imperial fleet. Deployment in Sector 9 Bay. Studied the holographic displays showing Imperial ship movements. The Empire is reacting exactly as we predicted. They're mobilizing their elite forces for a direct confrontation. Should we engage the Void Hunters when they arrive, sir? No, Bay said calmly. Let them come. They're about to learn that their reality warping technology is impressive but limited. They can bend space and time in small areas. We can rewrite the fundamental laws that govern reality itself. The human strategy was unlike anything the Empire had ever faced. Instead of massive fleet battles, the humans used precision strikes and psychological warfare. They targeted supply lines, communication networks, and isolated outposts. Most importantly, they demonstrated technology that seemed impossible to Imperial scientists. Captain Yoon Jae-hyun stood on the bridge of the destroyer Retribution as his ship phased back into normal space near an Imperial supply depot. The alien facility was massive, capable of supporting an entire fleet with fuel and ammunition. Weapons status? Yoon asked. Quantum disruptors ready, sir, his weapons officer reported. We can disable their fusion reactors without destroying the facility. Do it. The Retribution fired a single beam that passed through the depot's shields as if they weren't there. The beam struck the facility's power core, but instead of exploding, the reactor simply stopped working. The quantum disruptor had convinced the atoms in the fusion chamber to stop fusing. Target neutralized, sir. The depot is offline but undamaged. Yoon nodded. The human strategy was to disable, not destroy. They wanted the Empire to understand that human technology could penetrate any defense and shut down any system. But they weren't mindless destroyers. Meanwhile, Captain Hwang Sunwoo piloted the reconnaissance ship Shadow through Imperial space like a ghost. His vessel was smaller than the other human ships, designed for speed and stealth rather than combat. But its mission was equally important. Captain, we've successfully mapped the deployment patterns of the Imperial Titan fleet, his navigator reported. Their command ship is the dreadnought Eternal Wrath. Mass readings indicate it's roughly the size of Earth's moon. Hwang smiled grimly. Size isn't everything. Have we identified their command and control systems? Yes, sir. They're using quantum computing arrays protected by reality barriers. The aliens believe their systems are unhackable. They're about to learn otherwise. Prepare the quantum virus. The Shadow approached the massive Imperial dreadnought undetected, where other human ships used phase variance technology to avoid detection. The Shadow used something even more sophisticated. It existed in a state of quantum uncertainty, making it impossible for sensors to get a solid reading. Hwang launched a single probe toward the alien ship. The device was tiny, no larger than a human fist, but it contained something that would revolutionize warfare. The quantum virus was a self-replicating program that could infect quantum computing systems by exploiting the uncertainty principle itself. The probe phased through the dreadnought's hull and found the main computer core. Within seconds, the virus had spread throughout the ship's systems, but instead of destroying them, it did something far more subtle. It began feeding false information to the Imperial crews, making them believe their sensors and weapons were working perfectly, while actually showing them complete fabrications. Back on Vorthak Prime, the Emperor received increasingly desperate reports from his commanders. Your Majesty, the Void Hunters have engaged the human vessels, General Krathvon reported. They're reporting successful attacks, but our monitoring stations show the human ships are completely undamaged. How is that possible? We believe the humans are using some form of illusion technology, Your Majesty. Our pilots think they're hitting their targets, but the human ships exist in quantum states that make them impossible to damage. The Emperor's rage reached new heights. Deploy everything. Every ship, every weapon, every soldier. I want these humans erased from existence. But as the Imperial forces mobilized for total war, they discovered their equipment was failing in ways that made no sense. Communication systems that had worked for centuries suddenly couldn't connect to anything. Weapons that had never missed their target somehow couldn't lock onto human ships. Navigation systems that could plot courses across the galaxy became confused when approaching human vessels. The humans had done something that no enemy in Imperial history had ever achieved. They had made the Empire's own technology work against them. Dr. Lim Wonho, The chief scientist aboard the Indomitable explained the strategy to Captain Lee. We're not just using superior technology, Captain. We're demonstrating that the Empire's understanding of physics is fundamentally flawed. Their equipment works by following rigid rules. Our technology works by convincing the universe to follow different rules. Lee studied the reports coming in from across Imperial space. How long before they realize what we're really doing? Not long, Dr. Lim admitted. The Empire has some brilliant scientists. Once they understand that we're manipulating quantum mechanics directly, they'll try to adapt their technology to counter us. Let them try, Lee said. By then it will be too late. We've already demonstrated that humanity thinks about the universe differently than they do. That's a lesson they won't forget. The hunt had begun, but the roles were reversed from what the Empire expected. Instead of human ships fleeing from Imperial forces, the Empire found itself helpless against an enemy that could rewrite reality itself. For the first time in 3,000 years, the hunters had become the hunted. Admiral Kethvar stared at the tactical display in growing horror. Across Imperial space, alarm signals flashed red as new contacts appeared on sensor screens throughout the Empire. Human ships were materializing in orbit around major worlds near military bases and at critical supply stations. 12 vessels had somehow penetrated the most secure space in the galaxy simultaneously. Sir, emergency transmission from Fleet Command, Communications Officer Zethanal announced, his voice shaking. Human vessels have appeared at Sector 7 headquarters, the Titan shipyards, and the communications hub at Nexus Prime. Kethavar felt his world crumbling around him. For 3,000 years, the Empire had been untouchable. Their technology had kept them safe from every threat the galaxy could produce. Now a species they had dismissed as primitive was somehow striking at the heart of Imperial power. How many ships? He demanded. 13 confirmed contacts, sir. All broadcasting the same identification codes as the vessel here. They're calling themselves the United Earth Defense Force. On the main screen, the human captain looked completely calm. Li Jiwan stood with his hands behind his back, watching the Imperial fleet with the patience of someone who held all the advantages. Still want that demonstration, Admiral? Li asked. Kethvar's pride warred with his growing fear. The Empire did not surrender. The Empire did not negotiate with primitives. But the evidence before his eyes suggested these humans were anything but primitive. Open fire, he ordered. All ships maximum firepower. Destroy that vessel. The Third Fleet unleashed everything it had. Plasma cannons that could melt continents fired in sequence. Quantum torpedoes that could shatter moons streaked toward the human ship. Disruptor beams that could tear apart matter at the molecular level converged on the Indomitable's position. The human ship didn't even try to dodge. Every weapon struck their target perfectly. Energy readings showed impact forces that should have vaporized any known material. The space around the Indomitable glowed white-hot with released energy. When the light faded, the human ship hung in space completely undamaged. Commander Park, explain to our guests how phase variance technology works, Lee said calmly. The human weapons officer turned toward the screen with a smile that made Kethvar's scales crawl. Certainly, Captain. Admiral Kethvar, your weapons are very impressive. They work by applying massive amounts of energy to destroy matter in our dimension. Unfortunately for you, our ship exists in multiple dimensional states simultaneously. Park gestured to a display that showed complex equations Kethvar couldn't begin to understand. When you fire at us, you're hitting versions of our ship that exist in parallel dimensions. The energy is real, but it's being dispersed across quantum states where we don't actually exist. It's like trying to destroy a shadow by shooting at it. That technology is impossible. Velthar protested from his station. Dimensional manipulation requires energy levels that would collapse into a black hole. For your technology, yes, Park agreed. You're still thinking in terms of brute force applications. Humans learn to work with dimensional mechanics instead of against them. We don't force our way between dimensions. We convince the universe to let us exist in multiple states at once. Kethvar felt a chill run down his spine. The humans weren't just using advanced technology. They were using technology that operated on principles the Empire had never discovered. Impossible, he repeated weakly. Would you like us to prove it's possible? Lee asked. Commander Park, prepare a single kinetic round. Target the destroyer at grid reference 77 Alpha. Aye, sir. Magnetic rails charging to 15% power. Kethvar watched in fascination as the human ship's main gun began to glow with strange energy. Unlike Imperial weapons, this one didn't emit exotic particles or antimatter. It was just a massive magnetic accelerator, the kind of primitive technology the Empire had abandoned millennia ago. "Admiral, you're about to see what happens when primitive technology is powered by advanced science," Lee said. "Our kinetic rounds are solid metal, accelerated by magnetic fields powered by a controlled micro-black hole. The projectile reaches 12% of light speed before it leaves our ship." The gun fired with a flash of blue light. The round struck the Imperial destroyer dead center. The massive warship, protected by shields rated to stop stellar radiation and armor that could withstand nuclear bombardment, simply disintegrated. There was no explosion, no expanding debris field. The ship was there one instant and gone the next, its matter converted to pure energy by the incredible kinetic force. The silence on the Imperial bridge was complete. "How?" Kethvar whispered. Engineer Kim Daeho's voice came through the communication system from the human ship's engine room. "Mass times velocity squared, Admiral. At relativistic speeds, even a small projectile carries enough kinetic energy to level a city. Our rounds weigh 50 tons and travel at 12% light speed. The physics are quite simple. Your shields should not be able to withstand that kind of energy release," Velthar protested. "They don't have to," Kim explained patiently. "When the round impacts, we phase the explosion into a parallel dimension where our ship doesn't exist. The energy gets dispersed across quantum states while we remain safely in normal space." Kethvar stared at the empty space where the destroyer had been. An entire ship with 1,200 crew members had been erased from existence in less than a second. The Empire's most advanced technology had been unable to even slow down a simple metal projectile. "You're rewriting the laws of physics," he said. "No," Lee corrected gently. "We're using laws of physics your scientists never discovered. The universe is much more flexible than your Empire believes. You've spent 3,000 years perfecting the same technologies instead of exploring new possibilities." "Sir, we're receiving reports from across the Empire," Zethnal announced. "Human ships are disabling our communications networks. They're not destroying anything, just shutting down our equipment," Lee nodded. "We're not here to conquer your Empire, Admiral. We're here to teach you that threatening humanity has consequences. Your communications networks use quantum entanglement for faster-than-light data transmission. We've learned to manipulate quantum states directly. Your networks are offline because we've convinced the entangled particles to stop communicating." "This is impossible," Kethvar said again. But his voice held no conviction. "Admiral, your Empire has ruled the galaxy for 3,000 years using the same technologies and the same tactics. You've crushed every species that showed promise because you were afraid they might threaten your dominance. You've created a stagnant civilization that stopped innovating centuries ago." Lee stepped closer to the screen, his eyes hard. "Humans have been spacefaring for less than 200 years. We've been faster than light capable for only 50, but we've learned more about the fundamental nature of reality in the past 3 years than your Empire has discovered in 3 millennia. Do you know why?" Kethvar remained silent. "Because we never assume we know everything," Lee continued. "When you destroyed our diplomatic ship, you thought you were dealing with primitives who would cower before your superior firepower. Instead, you gave us the motivation to revolutionize our understanding of physics itself." The human captain gestured to his crew. "Every person on this ship represents humanity's response to your Empire's arrogance. We don't just use technology, Admiral. We reshape reality itself to serve our needs." Kethvar looked around his bridge at officers who had served with pride for decades. Now they stared at their instruments with growing fear as systems they had trusted completely proved useless against human innovation. "What do you want?" he asked finally. Lee's smile was cold. "I want you to remember this moment, Admiral. I want you to remember what happens when you underestimate a species that refuses to accept limitations." The bridge of the Eternal Dominion hummed with quiet efficiency. Admiral Kethvar stood at the center of the massive command deck, his reptilian eyes scanning the holographic displays that showed the Empire's most secure space. The Third Fleet patrolled these waters like they had for the past 1,000 years, protecting the gateway to the Empire's heart. Kethavar's scales gleamed under the soft blue lights of the bridge. He had served the Empire for 2 centuries, rising through the ranks by following orders and crushing enemies. Today felt like any other day in his long career. The Nexus gate remained secure. The sensor network showed nothing unusual. and the gravity wells that trapped any unauthorized ships worked perfectly. "Sir, all systems show normal readings," reported Senior Tactical Officer Velthar from his station. The younger officer's voice carried the confidence of someone who had never seen the Empire's technology fail. "Sensor grid is operating at full capacity. No ships detected within 10 light years of our position." Kethvar nodded slowly. The Empire's technology had kept them safe for 3,000 years. Their quantum sensors could detect a single ship from across a solar system. Their gravity interdiction fields could stop any vessel from jumping to faster than light speed. Their weapons could destroy entire fleets with a single volley. No enemy had ever surprised them in their own territory. The alarm changed everything. A piercing shriek filled the bridge as red lights flashed across every console. Officers jumped from their seats, their calm shattered by the impossible sound. The proximity alarm had not sounded in living memory. Nothing could get close enough to trigger it without being detected first. "Report." Kethavar's voice cut through the chaos like a blade. Velthar's claws clicked rapidly across his controls, his eyes wide with disbelief. "Sir, massive energy signature detected at 50,000 kilometers. It just appeared on our sensors." "That's impossible," Kethvar growled. "Nothing can penetrate our sensor net. Check your equipment." "Systems are functioning normally, sir. The signature is real." Velthar's voice cracked slightly. "Sir, it's huge. Mass readings indicate a battleship-class vessel." Kethvar felt his blood turn cold. In 3 millennia of Empire history, no enemy had ever appeared this close to an Imperial flagship without warning. The sensor network that surrounded them cost more than most planetary defense systems. It should have detected any ship the moment it entered the system. "Visual confirmation," Kethvar ordered. The main screen flickered to life, showing the star-filled darkness of space. At first, Kethvar saw nothing. Then his breath caught in his throat. A ship hung in the void like a predator waiting to strike. Its hull was sleek and dark, covered in angular armor that seemed to drink in the light of nearby stars. Strange markings ran along its sides in patterns no Imperial database would recognize. The vessel was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. It moved with a grace that made the massive Imperial ship seem clumsy by comparison. Energy readings showed power levels that matched their own flagship, but the design was completely alien to anything in Imperial records. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission," Communications Officer Zethnal announced, his voice barely above a whisper. "Put it through," Kethvar commanded. Static filled the bridge speakers, followed by sounds in a language none of them had heard before. The universal translator struggled with the alien words, producing fragments of meaning that made little sense. But one word came through clearly, repeated several times with growing clarity. "Human." The word hit the bridge like a physical blow. Every officer turned to stare at Admiral Kethvar, waiting for his reaction. He stood frozen, his mind racing back to events 3 years ago that had seemed unimportant at the time. First contact with a species called humans had been brief and violent. The Empire's diplomatic vessel had approached their primitive world with standard demands for immediate submission. The humans had refused and destroyed the ship with weapons that shouldn't have been able to penetrate Imperial shields. The loss had been written off as a fluke. The humans dismissed as a dangerous but primitive species confined to a single star system. Imperial command had decided the humans were not worth the effort of a full military response. Their technology was centuries behind the Empire's most basic systems. They had just learned to travel between stars. They posed no threat to an empire that spanned half the galaxy, but here was a human ship somehow appearing in the Empire's most secure space. "Sir, the alien vessel is moving," Velthar reported. "It's positioning itself directly between us and the Nexus Gate." Kethvar watched the human ship glide into position with smooth precision. Its movements showed complete confidence, as if it owned this space instead of being an intruder. The ship's weapons remained hidden, but its hull configuration suggested it was built for war. "Power readings are increasing," another officer called out. "They're charging something." "Battle stations," Kethvar ordered. All ships formed defensive positions around the flagship. The Third Fleet moved into formation with practiced efficiency. 12 heavy cruisers and 30 destroyers took positions around the Eternal Dominion, their weapons powering up and shields at maximum strength. The combined firepower of the fleet could destroy most enemy forces in minutes, but Kethvar felt uneasy. The human ship made no attempt to flee or call for reinforcements. It simply waited, as if the entire Imperial fleet posed no threat at all. "Sir, we're receiving another transmission," Zethnal announced. This time the translator worked better. A calm voice spoke in accented but clear Imperial standard, the official language of the Empire. The voice belonged to someone who sounded completely unafraid. "Imperial vessels, this is Captain Li Jiwan of the human battleship Indomitable. I have a message for your commander." Kethvar stepped forward, his pride overcoming his confusion. "This is Admiral Kethvar of the Imperial Third Fleet. You are in violation of Imperial space. Surrender immediately or be destroyed." The human captain's laugh was soft but somehow terrifying. "Admiral, 3 years ago your people destroyed our diplomatic ship and threatened our world. You called us primitives who should kneel before your empire. Today you will learn the price of underestimating humanity." The transmission paused, and Kethvar could hear his own breathing in the sudden silence. "Surrender your flagship, Admiral. Surrender it now or watch it burn." The bridge fell completely silent. In 3,000 years of Imperial history, no one had ever issued an ultimatum to them. The Empire gave orders. It did not receive them. The very idea was so impossible that for a moment no one knew how to respond. Kethvar stared at the human ship on his screen, trying to understand how this moment had come to pass. Everything he knew about warfare, about technology, about the natural order of the galaxy, told him this was impossible. But the ship was real. The human was real. And somehow everything had changed. Captain Li Jiwan stood on the bridge of the Indomitable, his hands clasped behind his back as he watched the Imperial fleet surround his ship. The massive alien vessels moved like ancient giants, their hulls bristling with weapons that could crack planets. Any reasonable person would feel terror at being outnumbered 43-1 by ships each larger than a city. Li felt only calm determination. "Navigator, report," he said quietly. Lieutenant Choi Hyuk checked his instruments without taking his eyes off the tactical display. "All Imperial vessels are in position, Captain. They've formed a standard siege formation around us. No escape routes by conventional means. Weapon status, Commander Park." Commander Park Soman smiled from her station. "All systems ready, sir. Kinetic penetrators loaded, and gravity assist charged to full power. The Singularity Core is stable at 0.3% output. Engineering." Lieutenant Colonel Kim Daeho's voice came through the comm system from the engine room. "Phase variance generators operating within normal parameters, Captain. We can maintain dimensional offset for 72 hours at current power levels." Li nodded slowly. 3 years of preparation had led to this moment. 3 years since the Empire had destroyed humanity's first diplomatic mission and declared Earth a primitive world that should submit or be conquered. The Empire had made a critical mistake that day. They had assumed human technology would remain static, just as theirs had for millennia. They were wrong. The destruction of the diplomatic ship had not broken humanity's spirit. Instead, it had focused human creativity and determination like nothing else in their history. Every nation on Earth had contributed resources, scientists, and engineers to a single project, making sure the Empire could never threaten humanity again. The Indomitable was the result. She looked like a warship, but she was really something much more dangerous. She was proof that humans thought about the universe differently than any other species the Empire had encountered. "Sir, the Imperial Admiral is demanding our surrender again," reported Communications Officer Lieutenant Nam Hyejin. "Put me through to their flagship," Li ordered. The main screen showed the bridge of the alien vessel. Admiral Kethvar stood in the center, his reptilian features twisted with anger and confusion. Behind him, other alien officers stared at the human ship with expressions that mixed fear and disbelief. "Admiral Kethvar," Li said calmly, "you seem surprised to see us." "Your ship is impossible," Kethvar snarled. "Our sensors should have detected you the moment you entered this system. No stealth technology can penetrate our quantum surveillance grid." Li smiled. "You're absolutely right, Admiral. No stealth technology can penetrate your sensors. We're not using stealth technology." The alien admiral's eyes narrowed. "Then how did you get here?" "We phased partially out of normal space-time," Li explained as if discussing the weather. "Your sensors work perfectly in this dimension. They just can't detect objects that exist primarily in parallel dimensions." The silence on the Imperial bridge was complete. Li could see alien officers exchanging glances of confusion and growing fear. He had expected this reaction. The Empire's technology had not changed in thousands of years because they believed they had already discovered everything worth knowing about the universe. That's impossible, Keithvar said finally. The laws of physics don't allow dimensional manipulation on that scale. The laws of physics as you understand them, Lee corrected gently. Humans have learned that those laws are more like guidelines. Reality is much more flexible than your scientists believe. Commander Park leaned forward at her station. Captain, the Imperial fleet is powering weapons. Fusion signatures and antimatter containment fields are going active. Let them, Lee said without taking his eyes off the alien admiral. Admiral Keithvar, your people made a mistake 3 years ago. You destroyed our diplomatic mission because you assumed we were too primitive to pose a threat. You never bothered to learn how humans think or what we're capable of when we're motivated. You're threatening the Empire with a single ship, Keithvar said, but his voice had lost some of its earlier confidence. No, Admiral, I'm offering you a choice. You can surrender your flagship now, or you can watch us demonstrate why threatening humanity was the worst mistake your empire has ever made. On the tactical display, Lee could see energy readings spiking across the Imperial fleet. Weapon systems that could glass continents were charging to full power. Any normal ship would be vaporized in seconds once that firepower was unleashed. The Indomitable was not a normal ship. Lee turned to his weapons officer. Commander Park, prepare a demonstration. Target the heavy cruiser off our starboard bow. Single kinetic penetrator. Aye, sir. Magnetic rails charging. Lee looked back at the alien admiral. Admiral, your fleet is about to fire on us. Before you do, I want you to understand something. Every human ship in this war was designed by people who survived your empire's first attempt to destroy us. We don't build ships to fight by your rules. We build them to rewrite the rules entirely. The Imperial fleet opened fire. Dozens of energy beams converged on the Indomitable's position. Plasma hot enough to melt asteroids, antimatter warheads that could crack moons, and quantum disruptors that could tear apart matter at the atomic level all struck the human ship simultaneously. The beams passed through the Indomitable's hull as if it wasn't there. Lee watched the alien admiral's expression change from anger to shock to something approaching terror. Your weapons are very impressive, Admiral. Unfortunately, they're designed to destroy objects that exist entirely in this dimension. We exist in several dimensions simultaneously. You're shooting at shadows. Impossible, Keithvar whispered. Commander Park, fire the demonstration shot. The Indomitable's main gun was not an energy weapon. It was something much simpler and infinitely more devastating. A solid projectile weighing 50 tons, accelerated to 12% of light speed by magnetic rails powered by a controlled micro-black hole. The kinetic penetrator struck the Imperial heavy cruiser dead center. The massive alien warship, protected by shields that could turn aside stellar radiation and armor that could withstand nuclear fire, simply ceased to exist. There was no explosion, no debris field. The ship was there one moment and gone the next. Its matter converted to energy by the sheer force of impact. The Imperial fleet stopped firing. Lee looked back at the screen where Admiral Keithvar stood frozen in shock. That was one shot at minimum power, Admiral. We have 47 more rounds loaded, and our singularity core is barely warming up. Would you like another demonstration? Lieutenant Kim's voice came from engineering. Captain, I'm reading massive power fluctuations across the Imperial fleet. Their crews are panicking. Understandable, Lee said. Admiral Keithvar, I'm going to make this very simple. You have 30 seconds to order the surrender of your flagship. If you refuse, we will demonstrate what happens when humans stop holding back. The alien admiral opened his mouth, then closed it again. Lee could see the conflict in his reptilian features. A lifetime of imperial superiority was crashing against the reality of human innovation. You cannot defeat the entire empire with one ship, Keithvar said, but his voice lacked conviction. Lee smiled again. Admiral, who said we only brought one ship?